I'm just completely surprised. I was not expecting that. There were so many massive records that are so popular, and to be included in that in the nomination was a surprise enough.
By the mid-1980s, Bonnie Raitt was one of the most respected slide guitarists and singers in rock. She was a musician's musician, a critical darling who'd spent more than a decade paying her dues on the road. But in a single devastating meeting, it all came crashing down. Her longtime label, Warner Brothers, listened to her newly finished album and delivered a brutal verdict. They hated it. Just like that, she was unceremoniously dropped. The album she had poured her soul into was shelved, destined to be locked, away in a vault. Battling her own personal demons and now rejected by the very industry she'd helped define, Bonnie Raitt's career was on the verge of complete collapse. This is the story of the lost album she came to despise, the corporate betrayal that left her silenced, and the incredible fight back that led to the biggest and most unlikely triumph of her life. To get just how crushing Bonnie Raitt's fall was, you have to understand the heights from which she fell. And those heights weren't measured in platinum records or sold-out stadiums, but in something far more valuable: respect. From the very beginning, Bonnie Raitt was different. Born into show business as the daughter of Broadway legend John Raitt, she sidestepped the world of polished theater for the raw, smoky clubs of the American folk and blues revival. While attending Radcliffe College in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the late 60s, she dove headfirst into the city's vibrant folk scene. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a calling. She found her voice not in lecture halls but in coffee houses, sharing stages with living legends of the blues, men like Mississippi Fred McDowell, Sippy Wallace, and Muddy Waters. She wasn't just some fan, she became their peer, a young, fiery-haired woman who could command a stage with just her voice and a guitar. And what she could do with that guitar, it was revolutionary. In an era dominated by male guitar heroes, Raitt emerged as a slide guitar virtuoso. Her style was fluid and emotional, a sound that felt like it came directly from her soul. It was a skill that earned her the admiration of blues masters who saw in her not a gimmick, but a kindred spirit. This authenticity was the bedrock of her career. Her game plan, as she later put it, was to follow the path of her blues heroes. Stay true to the music, play the best shows you can, and don't worry about being a pop star. When she signed with Warner Brothers and released her self-titled debut in 1971, critics were instantly captivated. Here was an artist who could effortlessly blend blues, folk, and R&B into a sound that was all her own. Throughout the 70s, she released a string of critically acclaimed albums like Give It Up and Takin' My Time. They weren't blockbuster hits, but they cemented her reputation as the artist other artists admired. She toured relentlessly, building a loyal following one sweaty club at a time. She became a fixture in the vibrant California music scene, collaborating with icons like Jackson Browne and Little Feat. By the late 70s, she finally got a taste of mainstream success with her cover of Del Shannon's Runaway, which became her first hit single. But Bonnie was never chasing hits. She was just grateful that hundreds of thousands of people wanted to buy her records and show up to her concerts year after year. She felt she had a pact with them. And that was Bonnie Raitt, through and through. A hard-working, deeply respected artist with a fiercely loyal fan base. But as the 1970s bled into the 1980s, the ground beneath her feet began to shift. The nuanced, artist-driven rock of the 70s was being bulldozed by the slick, synth-heavy demands of the MTV era. Corporate boardrooms started valuing marketability over musicianship. Her 1982 album, Green Light, was a muscular, hard-rocking affair that earned some of her best reviews ever. Raitt herself said it was the first album she actually had fun making. Critics loved its energy, but commercially, it fizzled. For the executives at Warner Brothers, this was a problem. The patience the once artist-friendly label was known for was wearing thin. Unbeknownst to her, the clock was ticking. The year was 1983. The music world was drowning in synthesizers and drum machines. It was the era of Thriller and Madonna, a time when image was becoming just as important as sound. For an artist like Bonnie Raitt, who was all about authenticity and roots music, this was dangerous territory. And Warner Brothers, her home for over a decade, was now looking at its artists through a different lens, one focused squarely on the bottom line. After the commercial stumble of Green Light, the pressure was on. Raitt went back into the studio to work on what would be her 9th record, tentatively titled Tongue and Groove. She was doing what she'd always done, finding great songs, pouring her heart into the performances, and creating a classic Bonnie. Raitt recorded that blended rock, blues, and even a little reggae. She worked diligently, believing in the album she was making. Then came the meeting. It's a moment that has since become infamous in the annals of music industry cruelty. The executives at Warner Brothers listened to the finished album. There was no debate. The verdict was swift and brutal. They hated it. But it was worse than that. They didn't just reject the album, they rejected her. They saw no commercial future for the fiery-haired blueswoman in the age of pop. In a 1990 interview, Raitt recounted the coldness of the blow. It was quite literally the day after I had finished mastering it, she recalled, when a letter arrived from Warner Brothers informing her she'd been dropped. Just like that, a relationship that had spanned her entire career was over. The planned tour was canceled, the music video was scrapped, and Tongue and Groove, the album she'd just finished, was condemned to a dusty vault. Raitt was left without a record deal, her career in shambles. This professional catastrophe was only half the story. While her career was publicly imploding, a private battle was raging. For years, Raitt had been part of the hard-partying rock and roll lifestyle. But by the mid-'80s, the fun had long since faded. The late nights and substance use were taking a severe toll. She later admitted the lifestyle had caught up with her. She felt heavy, her productivity suffered, and she was losing herself. The rejection from her label just threw gasoline on the fire. It was a vicious cycle. The career crisis fueled her addiction, and the addiction crippled her ability to fight back. She was at her lowest point, convinced her best days were behind her. Yet even in that darkness, a few glimmers of light appeared. One of the most unexpected came from an artist who was, at that moment, the undisputed king of the music world, Prince. A fellow Warner Brothers artist, he had seen firsthand how the corporate culture was changing. After seeing Raitt perform, he reached out. He was a fan and recognized the injustice of her situation. He offered her a deal with his own label, Paisley Park Records, and even wrote a few songs just for her. She flew to his legendary Paisley Park studio to collaborate. It was a fascinating pairing, the earthy, blues-rooted activist and the enigmatic, funk-pop visionary. While she deeply respected his genius, the material wasn't quite the right fit. The songs were in the wrong key, and the lyrics didn't feel like her. The collaboration was short-lived and didn't lead to a record, but the gesture itself was a vital lifeline. At a time when the industry had written her off, one of the biggest stars on the planet saw her value. Prince's support was a crucial reminder that her talent hadn't vanished even if her record deal had. Being dropped by Warner Bros. Was more than a professional setback. It was an erasure. For 2 years, Bonnie Raitt was in limbo. She was a recording artist with no new record to sell. She kept playing live, surviving on her savings and pure grit, but the momentum was gone. She was fading from public view. Then, in a move of breathtaking cynicism, Warner Brothers decided to resurrect her career on their terms. In 1985, 2 years after shelving Tongue and Groove, the label called with a stunning announcement. They were going to release the album after all. Perhaps Prince's interest had made them realize there might still be some money to be made from her name. Raitt was horrified. Releasing 2-year-old material as if it were new felt dishonest to her and her fans. a strange negotiation began. Warner Brothers agreed to let her recut half of the album. The result was a Frankenstein's monster of a record, a haphazard collection of old tracks from the tongue and groove sessions stitched together with newer, more commercially minded songs. The album's new title was 9 Lives, a name dripping with unintended irony. Released in 1986, it was a record born of compromise, and it sounded like it. Critics and fans were unimpressed. It was scattered and strained, lacking the soulful cohesion of her best work. 9 Lives was a commercial and critical failure, her lowest charting album since her debut. For Raitt, it was a painful experience, the final, bitter nail in the coffin of her relationship with Warner Brothers. The fallout was devastating. Raitt was now 37 years old, an age the music industry often considers a death sentence for female artists. The failure of 9 Lives seemed to confirm every doubt the industry had. To survive, she had to scale everything back. In early 1987, Bonnie Raitt made the life-altering decision to get sober. It was a choice born from a lifestyle awakening, a realization that the path she was on would only end with her becoming sloppy or dead. This decision, made in the quiet desperation of her career's darkest moment, would become the unlikely catalyst for its most brilliant resurrection. Bonnie's story is an incredible example of an artist fighting for their integrity against all odds. If you appreciate stories about creative resilience and the unseen struggles behind the music, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We're dedicated to telling the stories that matter, and you won't want to miss what's next. Sobriety changed everything. It was a spiritual awakening and physical rebirth. For the first time in years, the fog of despair began to lift. The journey back began not with a bang, but with a quiet, deliberate rebuilding process. First, she needed a new label. After being rejected by more than a dozen of them, she finally found a home at Capitol Records. It was Joe Smith, the then CEO of Capitol, who took a chance on her. They offered her a modest deal, the kind a new artist might get with no massive expectations. The message was simple. Just make a record that you want to make. For Raitt, after years of corporate pressure, these were the most beautiful words she could hear. She was finally being given the one thing she craved: freedom. The next piece of the puzzle fell into place with producer Don Was. She'd worked with him once before and loved the experience, understood her completely. He saw her stripped down, live show, and knew that was the key. It was just about hearing her unadorned voice, he later said. Their approach was the exact opposite of the slick, overproduced sound of the 80s. They recorded most of the album live in the studio, with the full band playing together, capturing an emotional honesty that you just can't fake. Freed from the pressure to write a hit, Raitt started writing from the heart. She retreated to a cabin in Northern California and, reflecting on her sobriety, her aging parents, and her own mortality, she penned the song that would become the album's cornerstone. Nick of Time. It was about aging, fear, and the startling realization that life is finite, a topic you almost never heard in pop music. She thought it was too personal to release, but its raw honesty was exactly what made it so powerful. The album, also titled Nick of Time, came together as a collection of songs that mirrored her journey. It was a mature, soulful record about love, loss, and resilience. It featured a gritty cover of John Hiatt's Thing Called Love and the heart-wrenching ballad that would become her signature, I Can't Make You Love Me. Wait, hold on. I Can't Make You Love Me was actually on her next album. But Nick of Time was packed with soulful honesty all the same. She was a 40-year-old woman singing about her life without flinching. Released in March 1989, Nick of Time didn't explode onto the charts. It was a slow burn, a word-of-mouth success. The music video for Thing Called Love, featuring her friend Dennis Quaid, got heavy rotation on VH1, introducing her to a whole new audience. The album started climbing the charts, slowly but surely. The Daos' real moment of vindication came a year later at the 1990 Grammy Awards. Bonnie Raitt, the artist who had been dumped and written off, was nominated for a handful of awards. And that night, in one of the most shocking and heartwarming upsets in Grammy history, she cleaned up. She took home 4 Grammys, including 3 for Nick of Time, Best Female Rock Vocal Performance, Best Female Pop Vocal Performance, and the biggest prize of the night, Album of the Year. Her 4th win came from a duet with the legendary John Lee Hooker. The image of a stunned and joyous Raitt accepting the award became an iconic symbol of triumph. The effect was immediate. The album she had made on a shoestring budget shot to #1 on the Billboard charts, a full year after its release. It would go on to sell over 5 million copies. At the age of 40, after 2 decades in the business, Bonnie Raitt was, against all odds, a superstar. Bonnie Raitt's journey through the 1980s is more than just a comeback story. It's a powerful lesson in resilience and artistic integrity. She was dropped, dismissed, and personally broken. The album that became 9 Lives was a symbol of that time: corporate rejection, creative suppression, and the feeling of being silenced. But from those ashes, she didn't just rise, she soared. The redemption she found wasn't by chasing trends. It came from the opposite direction. By getting sober, she reclaimed her spirit. By finding a label that gave her freedom, she reclaimed her voice. And by singing about her own life, the anxieties of aging, the wisdom of survival, she connected with an audience that was hungry for something real. The very things that made Warner Brothers see her as a commercial liability in 1983 were the exact same things that propelled her to the greatest success of her life. Today, Bonnie Raitt is an icon of endurance. Her story proves that true artistry isn't about conforming to the moment, but about staying true to yourself, even when the world tells you you're finished. Her greatest triumph wasn't just winning a Grammy, it was proving that the most powerful music comes not from a formula, but from a life fully and bravely lived. Bonnie Raitt's comeback is one of the greatest in music history. What other artists have mounted incredible comebacks after being written off? Let me know your picks in the comments below.